So we shall just dive straight in, I suppose, with Starship Troopers.
Yes, Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers is one of history's most misunderstood films ever, according to about 1,000 opinion pieces in various newspapers, magazines and online publications over the past 15 years. To which I say, really? Really? A film from a director who grew up in a country occupied by a fascist regime? A film from the director of RoboCop? Starship Troopers is one of the most misunderstood as being misunderstood films ever, says one opinion piece shared by me. However, at the time of its release, a lot of critics at least did seem to miss the point, even those who had no problem understanding RoboCop.
How?
Yeah, I don't know. And even many of those who got it had their panties in a bunch thinking the audiences wouldn't. Now, it is entirely possible to enjoy Starship Troopers simply as a sci-fi action film, and I don't have any particular issue with that. But while not all viewers may comprehend all of its themes and the satire in which it bathes, and while, furthermore, I admit I don't have the greatest of faith in the critical faculties, or lack thereof, of the great movie-going public, it costs me much to believe that it could be misunderstood or misconstrued. That children crushing insects and being handed assault rifles, drill sergeants going way beyond Full Metal Jacket's Hartman and actually maiming the recruits, that the unquestioning tribalism and jingoism, or one of our heroes sporting a goddamn full-on SS uniform and trench coat, could be seen as either merely incidental or as a glorification of violence. Then, of course, I remember the world I currently live in and doubt myself and wonder if the right-wing militarism, violence and fascist might makes right ideology isn't, in fact, taken at face value by many, and, well, I die a little more inside. But this is supposed to be a fun discussion about ephemeral things like films, right? So, for those unfamiliar with the film at hand, or at least in need of a quick recap, based on a 1959 novel by Robert A. Heinlein, Starship Troopers is set in a far future Earth where a militaristic, totalitarian government, founded after veterans overthrew a failed democracy, rules the world. And it begins in Buenos Aires, in a high school for almost 30-year-olds. At release, the youngest of the principal students was 24.
Yeah.
Now, I'd let that slide if it was just a setup, but all the action takes place over about only a year. These ancient teenagers... Johnny Rico, played by Casper Van Dien, Carmen Ibanez, Denise Richards, Carl Jenkins, Neil Patrick Harris, and Dizzy Flores, Dina Meyer, are about to graduate, and all four intend joining the military, which is currently engaged in a fight for survival against the antlions. Bugs, an insect-like alien species. Lovesick Johnny is really only following girlfriend Carmen, but she's off to Fleet Academy while he becomes an infantry grunt, and is soon to be Dear John'd to the surprise of absolutely no one. Well, except him, because he's not the smartest tool in the shed. Smartest? Sharpest tool in the shed. I probably wasn't writing this as the smartest tool in the shed either.
Sorry, I'm still laughing into the crook of my arm about Lovesick Johnny for some reason. It sounds like an indie band.
Following him for romantic reasons is Dizzy, while strongly psychic Carl is off to join the Space SS Paranormal Division. About to quit during basic training, a bug attack obliterates Buenos Aires, and Johnny decides to stay and show those rotten insects what for. What? The only good bug is a dead bug. What's that you say? What of the reporter who questions if human expansionism was a provocation to and incitement for this war? Well, that species traitor is soon dealt with by the insects. That'll teach him to think for himself. After a false start, humans will turn the tide, and dear Johnny will meet Carmen and Carl again on and off the battlefield, and we can all feel good that the bug menace is being repelled by our intrepid heroes, and that these rotten, clearly not ussies, are afraid of us and dying in their millions. Yay! Now, how in the bloody hell did Verhoeven get us to cheer for fascism? RoboCop scribe Ed Neumeyer's script hews pretty closely to Heinlein's novel, just tweaking and amplifying things enough to raise it to satire, rather than use the tone of the book, which takes its fascism rather more seriously. And Verhoeven brings it all to screen with much of his penchant for provocative, over-the-top gore and violence. as well as his trademark humour, which here often stems from incongruous or winking juxtaposition. Getting the audience on board, however unwittingly, with the tribalism and fascistic messaging isn't much of a trick. That's the danger of fascist ideology and exactly the point of the film. But it's also pretty obvious, and while Verhoeven's film visually quotes, for instance, Leni Riefenstahl's The Triumph of the Will, so does Star Wars, by the way, and not on the side you might think, you don't need to have much of a deeper reading of cinema and literature to see it. Or at least so I thought, until I found an interview with Paul Verhoeven in The Guardian, sometime after I wrote these notes. He says there, "I was using Riefenstahl to point out, or so I thought, that these heroes and heroines were straight out of Nazi propaganda. But no one saw it at the time. I don't know whether or not the actors realised. We never discussed it. I thought Neil Patrick Harris arriving on the set in an SS uniform might clear it up." Frightening, huh? It always struck me as obvious, even if at the time I could only recognise the imagery as Nazi rather than specifically Riefenstahl. But apparently, I'm the weirdo. I mean, you only need a functioning brain. Yes, right. Okay, I see what I did there. In all seriousness, though, I do believe the idea of a wide misunderstanding of the film is unfounded. In the end, though, I guess before we discuss it, what I haven't addressed is it any good? Well, yes, very. Entertaining, funny, clever. And while some of the special effects, and in particular the sets, look a little ropey now, it's still watchable enough nowadays from that point of view, and most importantly, the film's message and themes stand up. Indeed, it's another of those films which seems sadly more relevant now than on its release. One question remains to me though, and perhaps you boys can help me out here, and it's the one message in Starship Troopers I've never been able to comprehend. What is the hidden meaning of Patrick Muldoon's willfully awful hairstyle throughout? It's so bad and so obvious that it must symbolise something, but I know not what. Is it a hitherto unknown type of hirsute bug, perched atop his head as a setup for a sequel? It haunts me.
Yes. If it wasn't something that they touched upon in Starship Troopers 2, Hero of the Federation, which is a marked step down from this, really is.
Yes, which I watched this afternoon for
Awful.
For the first time. I didn't move on to any of the other sequels after that. That was plenty.
I think, well, we did watch Starship Troopers 3 at some point, didn't we? It was actually okay.
I had this idea that I saw Starship Troopers 3 at some point, yeah, but...
I remember one of you talking about it and I was saying it wasn't the worst thing ever.
I'm sure I've seen one of the sequels. Starship Troopers 2, even though it's written by Ed Neumeier, it feels very much like it's a retrofit.
Yes, I believe it was, yeah.
Of like a somewhere kind of a bit like Aliens, a bit like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that kind of film, dropped into that universe and having nothing to do with it at all.
Yes. But regardless of those films' lack of quality, Starship Troopers is fantastic. Still one of my favourites. I'm glad to see it holds up just as well now as it did when I saw it donkeys ago. I just can't imagine people not seeing this. It's so ridiculously over the top at points that surely it must have clued them in somehow.
Yeah, I don't understand this. Because I'd seen all these articles that I mentioned, Scott, about it's the most misunderstood film. So I'm like, really? Was it? And I still don't believe that it was by the vast public, but I went back and looked at it, and there are huge numbers of well-respected critics and well-read magazines and things just not getting it. And I'm like,
I think the most significant part of this film's legacy is that really that it was... if only we could go back 20 years and pay attention to people's response to this film, it would have clued us in on a lot of what was going to happen a little bit further down the line. It's a really, really good film, and it works on a great many different levels. And I always find myself coming back to Starship Troopers every 3 or 4 years or something like that. And I don't think I've ever enjoyed it less than I did the first time in the cinema. And I remember coming out of the cinema on a bit of a high. It was one of those films that was kind of pushing the envelope a bit. I remember coming out, I think I saw it twice actually. I think we might have seen it first, and I remember going back and seeing it with my girlfriend, or the other way around, I can't remember. But I remember coming out...
So I have a fake idea that I know the three of us saw, but I thought Stephanie went with us.
Oh, maybe. Actually, do you know what? You might be right. I remember, did we not go and get a kebab afterwards? Because I remember having the conversation, the three of us at least, about one of those films. It's like, I can't believe that was only a 15.
Yes, I have a big recollection of something like that, yeah.
And there are moments still which are like phenomenally visceral. And everything about it is so over the top that, again, yes, I'm only going to end up repeating what everyone else has said. A, it's a fantastic film. B, it's superbly entertaining and a really good watch. And C, I can't believe people didn't get it.
Yeah. Particularly things like the news blasts, the updates that are done there. It's everything that was done in RoboCop, but far more so. So
Yeah.
I think they would have a template for understanding this already in mind.
What were we 18 when this came out?
17 or 18, I'm not sure what time of the year it came out, but
Yeah, and to think, like I know my political stances weren't particularly well formed at that time, and I. Even I
sure it wasn't a Nazi though.
Well, no, it certainly wasn't Nazi, and I certainly remember coming out of the cinema thinking, "Well, that's an amazing warning about the dangers of fascist propaganda." So, if I was able to understand it as a relatively unsophisticated 17 or 18-year-old, then yeah, the mind boggles, man. The mind boggles.
Interesting to think. I've only read the Heinlein books based on once a long time ago, but it certainly presented everything in a much different light. It's unapologetically pro-military, whereas this very much isn't. Despite, as you say, it's not really deviating all that much from the text of it. It's just presenting it through a lens of over-the-top irony, and gives it a completely different reading when you watch the film version.
Oh, it recontextualises it massively.
Yeah, so it's certainly nowhere near the most accurate translation to the screen, but it's probably one of the most effective. Certainly in ways of actually being a piece of art and how that can be, as you say, recontextualised. Also, one of the few that the only one we'll speak about today that recontextualises the fascists as being the heroes rather than the oppressors. So,
yeah. I'd be interested to go back and see what the other nominations, or what the nominations throughout awards season were for adapted screenplay that year, because I think retrospectively you could go back and make a pretty strong argument that this should have been up for awards contention for that, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if, like, it depends on how you would judge that though, because it's so close to, because some of the dialogues even seem like the funnier bits, it's just like slightly distorted to change the tone, whereas it's not that. I suppose it's still an adaptation, but they never actually
not that different on the page. Yeah,
it's just let's say it's got to say that the lens is key to it.
Well, I've never forgotten my lesson that the enemy cannot push the button if you disable his hand. And I suspect I will take that with me for the rest of my life.
Medic.
Of that wee running gag.
Yeah.
Especially when it gets later on doing it, it's just like, it gets so like, mad with fact. They're not screaming, it's like, medic.